Trying to think what else I want to say about this, because again, there's just so many levels to this. And if you've been here, okay, tying up a loose end here, there's something sort of infantilizing about not holding people accountable. You know, just that kind of idiot empathy that has a total disregard for justice. You know, you've got those two kind of wings of the bird, justice and mercy, love and law. And if you only have one wing in operation, the bird don't fly. So if you're just totally mercy, 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 the poor immigrant, the poor beset upon, vulnerable immigrant, that kind of saccharine idiot empathy, or you could just say imbalanced empathy, I mean, what's good about it is you don't lose touch with the humanity of the person you're talking about, but it has a way of infantilizing and removing agency from the object of the empathy. And again, it's like fundamentally here, if you've broken the law, there's a consequence. That doesn't mean you're in every dimension a bad person, but it does mean you did something wrong. You have to be accountable for that. So I don't have a problem with enforcing the law in this case around immigration. Now, if you've been here for many years in the country, gotten comfortable and have a life here, yeah, it's going to be a fucking chaotic mess to, you know, it's easy enough to say, you know, you just enforce the law. But boy, there's a lot of investment and there's a whole human dimension to enforcing the law that is messy. It's really messy. But if the law is to mean anything, if the rules of the game are to mean anything, they have to be enforced. Anyways, I'm just kind of sketching out some of my own thinking on this issue and evolution on it. And I'm not closed-minded to what does the enforcement look like. You know, I'm sure there's different creative ways to do that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a zero-sum game. But it's certainly not a bad thing to value having national integrity. And that's an evolution for me. As obvious as that seems in some ways now, but how this plays out in the job market is, especially because of the resume I have and all, you know, a bunch of other things, you know, it's kind of just entry-level positions that I've been applying to. And one thing that I've thought I would want to do is, you know, be a farmhand, get out there and just get busy. Be diligent. My son, be diligent. Work hard, you know. And not in some abstract way, but in a concrete way. And farm work has that in spades. However, one thing that I've come up against I didn't anticipate, I just hadn't thought it through, is that the agricultural industry in the US is very relies heavily on immigrant labor. Again, I don't have the numbers on this, but that's just my impression. And it seems like the little of my own personal experience kind of bears that out. And you'll hear people say it's because citizens don't want to take the low-paid, heavy labor type of jobs. And that's a little bit more, I don't think that's so straightforward. I mean, there's some truth in that, but I think it's a little bit more complicated. And when you take into account some other factors, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, chicken or the egg type of thing. Maybe I'll get into that in a second, but yeah, I mean, the practical daily, the actual matter of the fact is that, yeah, it's a lot of immigrants. And again, here's where my own ignorance is at play, because there are legal ways to bring in seasonal labor. You can sponsor, I guess, is my understanding. And really quickly, it starts to get into fraught territory, because you can have a suspicion, and probably one that's grounded in reality, and grounded in some level of intuitive wisdom, and also just real-world knowledge, that, the work crew at any given kind of agricultural enterprise business, can suspect that probably many of them are there illegally. But yeah, it's hard, because you start to walk into this territory of, are you profiling people? And we have these kind of social guardrails about, it's kind of there's an impropriety about, you can't just go up and ask somebody their status. And so, yeah, it's tricky. It's really difficult, fraught territory. And yeah, if I was a citizen here my whole life, born and raised here, and I had somebody come up and ask me just based on me looking a certain way, yeah, I'd be pissed off. That wouldn't feel great. So again, it's nuanced. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that a lot of the workforce, especially, in low-paid positions, hotels maybe, fast food, I've got my suspicions there. Agricultural industry, I think, is kind of infamous. Farm work, that a lot of them are there under false pretenses. And I wonder, there's that wisdom about, citizens wouldn't take those jobs. That's why there's this incentive for immigrants to come in and do the work. Maybe that's true. But I wonder if there wasn't a better, if the system wasn't more efficient, wasn't more straightforward, if we didn't have better, if we had better vetting and better, the application process was streamlined, all of that. If the legal pathway was clearer and easier, maybe not easier, but just clearer, if that kind of if that wouldn't kind of radically transform the whole system, such that maybe there would be better pay, better benefits, after the initial shakeup. long term, if it wouldn't be that those industries would attract more citizen workers. I mean, to me, it's totally dignified and um, worthwhile and perfectly uh, there's total dignity in doing farm work. I personally don't see it as beneath me or beneath anybody, but I just wonder if there wasn't like a wholesale transformation where we brought integrity back into the system, if that kind of inherited, wisdom about immigrants being the only ones that work those jobs. I wonder if that isn't more of a symptom of the system itself being broken, and if that would fall away or transform as we fixed the system. Anyways, I didn't really articulate that too well. But man, it's complicated. There's so many levels to this, because it's like, so I applied to a couple places, a couple farms, and got interviews. And the interviews I thought went pretty well. Seemed like I probably would have got the job. But just where I'm at in my own political evolution, ethical evolution, sense of, what's right and wrong. And again, seeing the crew is mostly Spanish speaking, especially at this one place. Latin American, I would guess from Mexico, but I don't know. I can't really say for sure. I'm feeling a little bit talked out, and I'm kind of hungry right now. Feeling a little bit wilted. But I brought it up because it is an ethical concern for me. I guess how I look at it is, I don't care where you're from. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you look like. If you're a hard worker, if you're a kind person, if you're respectful, I want to work with you. I don't care. I'm happy to work with you. That said, if you're here in the country under false pretenses, and I find that out, I'm not going to feel good about that. I'm not going to feel comfortable with that. Then I'm having to keep that secret, or I'm having to out you to the boss, and I just don't want to be involved, or I have to quit, which is probably the route I would take. To be honest, I'm not the federal government. It's like, we didn't start the fire. Was that Billy Joel? We didn't start the fire. That's how I feel. I mean, I didn't fuck this system up. I'm not going to carry the weight of all that. I wish it was better, but I also don't feel comfortable being complicit in the continuation of a corrupt system. And so, yeah, again, here's an ethical dilemma. And the way I dealt with it is I just tried to be direct during the interview. I asked the guy in one case and woman in another case. I mean, I did the whole interview, showed up, appropriately, was respectful, presented myself well, and, just, made myself available, whatever schedule. I'm a hard worker, and just tried to show my integrity in the whole thing. But part of that was I would not feel comfortable finding out that either somebody's there under false pretenses and the owner doesn't know, or more than likely, what my suspicion is, a lot of employers are willfully ignorant, or just may completely may not be ignorant of the situation, just be making the choice to hire people extra legally, illegally. And so I asked, I said, again, as skillfully as I could, knowing that I'm opening up a can of worms probably. When you're you're doing something illegal, you don't want the light shined upon you. And truth is sunlight, and the truth is a great disinfectant, but it can really rock the boat. So I walked in, trepidatious to the question and tried again to be skillful and but also direct because it matters to me. And I asked the guy, I said, to work here, you need to have the legal permission to work here. Is that right? I said something like that. And it opened up a little bit of a conversation and tried to express some of what I'm expressing now, but in a truncated, succinct way. Just, that it's an ethical thing for me that I wouldn't really feel comfortable. I don't know what I said at this point, but it was a tonal shift in the interview, and it went from feeling like, yeah, I probably got this job to I haven't heard back. In the other case, I think I asked if they use E-Verify. And it sucks because it's such a polarized and impoverished conversation politically that we have, that any kind of opposition to the status quo tends to get coded in other people's minds or read as you're a bigoted, racist, right-wing, whatever, fascist, or I don't know. And I don't feel that way at all. That's why I've tried to, go into depth here, talking about all the different shades of nuance. Yeah, man, it's just so hard to say because people don't have integrity and accountability, and they're not willing to be honest, and you've got people's life and livelihoods and on the line, and this world is a mess. And maybe I should just shut my mouth in situations like that. But I figured, it was kind of a litmus test question for me, because the way they reacted, it wasn't, especially because I was being kind of thoughtful and skillful and humble about it and trying to ask it in a sincere way. I wasn't coming out and saying, fuck these fucking illegals, and, I wasn't being disrespectful or, kind of really unhealthy, unhelpful right wing, I guess more extreme right wing. It wasn't that energy. But I figured, if somebody really does have integrity and they're in alignment with the law and doing things above board, they're not going to be offended by me asking something like that, especially from a thoughtful, careful, sincere place, that they would value that and respect that and say, you know what, I appreciate you asking that, because a lot of people do sidestep the law and turn a blind eye, and we value integrity here, and we want to do things the right way. And so, and they didn't respond that way, really. So I guess it was a litmus test, kind of a question. But again, you run up, my own puritanicalism, you run up against, am I being too precious? Am I being too scrupulous? Too rigid with my own ethical values and stuff here? I've been fixated in one ideology. Am I getting captured and fixated in another ideology? So you got to be on watch for that kind of thing. But yeah, even with that E-Verify, this recent Omaha crackdown at the Glen Valley Foods or whatever it was in Nebraska, they interviewed the owner afterwards, and I don't know how much I take him at his word. He seemed mostly like a sincere guy, but he had everything to lose. So of course, it'd be great incentive to lie. But he was saying, yeah, I did E-Verify. The thing that they ask you to do that most places don't do. Most places will just accept whatever number. See, there's so many ways to corrupt the system and to sidestep the law, to break the law, because you can provide, false documents. And so it is possible for an owner to be sincere and to, have done what the law requires and to still be hiring people that are there illegally. And this guy in particular was saying he'd used E-Verify on all of the people he hired. But people will will steal or buy, or I don't know how it works, will present a real ID, but it's a stolen ID. Or, yeah, I mean, there's just so many ways to scam, to cheat the system. And yeah,